Joining us now to talk a whole bunch of stuff. We've got so many topics to discuss is United States Senator Dr. Bill Cassidy. Hey, Dr. Bill, welcome back to Keel. How are you today?
Hey, Robert, by the way, I've got people working for me in D.C. from Shreveport. They listen to Keel on their radio as we drive around D.C. So just hats off to your app.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have you seen Avengers Endgame yet?
My daughter did. I'm thinking 3-hour movie. She goes, it was worth it. It was lovely. So I promised my other daughter I'd take her if she gets all her homework done this week.
Don't give anything away. Everybody I know, family, friends, etc., are terrified of tripping across a spoiler. So, well, you haven't seen it yet, so we can discuss. Listen, I saw and I read a couple. I've already heard a couple of your interviews and read a couple of articles about you are sort of at literally the vanguard. You are spearheading not only a prescription drug reform research and legislation, but it seems to me that President Trump has basically chosen you to be the lead guy on Republican health care as we approach the next presidential election. I'm not overstating, am I?
No, you're not. We're working incredibly closely with President Trump on multiple issues. But one is the high cost of drug costs. One is how do we make health insurance and health care more affordable. The next is paid family leave. I'm honored the president has kind of recognized that. And believe me, we're working tightly with his administration to make these good things happen.
Well, let's start here. Let's start with why the Republican Party feels compelled to come up with an alternative to the growing Democrat cry for complete government control of health care. What will be the Republican alternative to that? Hopefully not bigger government, hopefully not higher costs.
I'd rather speak about the principle, and the principle is that the patient should have the power. And I'm not speaking of Louisiana Democrats, I'm speaking of Washington, D.C. Democrats, particularly their presidential candidates. But if Republicans want the patient to have the power, those Democratic presidential candidates want the government to have power over the patient. It's pretty remarkable, Robert. They want, Medicare for all. Medicare is going bankrupt in about 8 years. And so if you're on Medicare now, we got to fix it so it's there for you. But they want to take the health insurance that 150 million people get through their employer, that by and large they like, take it from them and put them into Medicare, a program going bankrupt in 8 years, which means that no one will have it because there won't be any money. And so Medicare for all will be Medicare for none.
So
we've got to have an alternative that works, and one that can be paid for, and one in which the patient has the power.
I was just going to say, painting with a broad brush, what do you, being the number one guy on this panel, this committee, this commission, painting with a broad brush, what do you see that Republican alternative is?
Well, let's think about what patients having the power means. For example, price transparency. Wouldn't it be crazy that if your doctor orders a blood test or an x-ray for you, you know the cost of it before you get it done, as opposed to find out 6 weeks later and you can't believe how much it costs? That's kind of crazy, huh? Well, no, it happens with your cell phone. It happens with your blue jeans. It happens with your car. But the one thing it does not happen with is your x-ray test. And so people get a test that could be $250, and instead they pay $2,500. Why? Because they didn't know to go down the street, and they could get it a lot cheaper. We're trying to change that to where the patient has the power to know. As one example, we're trying to lower drug costs. We've actually succeeded already. And there's no silver bullet, but there's silver buckshot. And so you do a lot of little things, and they all add up. But we work with the president tightly with this, something called gag clauses. There was a guy from Tangipahoa Parish came to me. He said, listen, I got to sign a contract with a pharmacy benefit manager, the insurance company that handles drugs, that forbids me from telling a patient that it's cheaper to pay cash for their drug than to pay their insurance copay. What? You can't do that? So we worked at it. We got it passed through Congress. I'm standing over the president's right shoulder as he signs it into law that gag clauses are illegal. What does it mean? Having coffee with the guy in Metairie. And I mentioned we got rid of gag clauses. Explained what they were. He goes, my doc ordered a blood thinner for me. I go to the pharmacist. He tells me my copay is $190. I say, what? How much if we pay cash? And he goes, pay cash at $70. He saved $120 just because he had the presence of mind to ask. It's now illegal for those insurance companies to not tell you these things.
But Dr.
So anyway,
Bill,
we're making progress.
As the Democrat Party, especially the announced presidential candidates, move farther and farther and farther left, I mean, it seems you can introduce, and you have, like 3 different bills to lower prescription drug costs. But what they're really about at this point is complete control of the healthcare system by the federal government. Do any of these have any chance? What can you do?
Well, I don't know. If Bernie Sanders becomes president, he's going to do his best. There's a lot of things the president can do bypassing Congress. Believe me, Barack Obama proved that. And so I think that this next election is going to be important. We've got to kind of, as a country, decide, do we want the patient to have power or do we want the government to have power over the patient? And it's critical, Robert. I mean, every election, you're either going a little bit to the individual having power or a little bit to the government having power. We need to go to the individual having power.
If you would be so kind, I would love for you to tell us a little bit, sort of a peek behind the curtain. When you have a meeting, when the phone rings and it's the President of the United States, when you go to the Oval Office to discuss these things of such importance with the President of the United States, take us into that room a little bit. What's the conversation like? Do you sort of beat around the bush a little bit? You make a little small talk? What does he bring up? How many ideas come from the President and his people? How many ideas come from you? What kind of listener is Donald Trump?
So Donald Trump, my daughter once went with me to the White House, and she goes, Daddy, he's much nicer in person than he seems on TV. And when you're with him in person, he's incredibly charming. And he's funny. He can tell you stories. He's on TV. Sometimes he's just ticked off at somebody. But in person, and he doesn't mind, he doesn't pay attention to the details. He's got broad strokes. He wants to lower cost. And if you say, hey, Mr. President, right now there's something called a gag clause, he goes, what? A gag clause? Well, we're going to get rid of that. And he starts, how can we get rid of that? Okay, get rid of it. He's a big picture guy, and he really cares about the average working. If Hillary Clinton was elitist, Donald Trump is not an elitist. Donald Trump is a guy that eats ketchup on a steak, that is very much kind of what's going to matter to the person sitting at home in their house, trying to make ends meet, and they're paying too much for health care. They're paying too much for this. They're paying too much for that.
This is something,
and that's his strength. This
is something I've talked to a bunch of friends about, and when I make my case, they may roll their eyes at first, but when I make the case, they go, you may be right. And the point I'm going to make here with you is, and I want you to respond, as the Democrats as a party move farther and farther or further and further left with more radical ideas, as they move that way, as they continue to embrace the Russian collusion lie, I got to tell you, Dr. Bill, when I say Donald Trump could win 40 or 45 states, I see the potential of a Trump landslide, don't you?
You do, but the president always has the ability to step on his good message. You know what I'm saying? I think even his best friends wish, in fact, particularly his best friends wish that every now and then he wouldn't tweet as much. Because you have a great kind of storyline going out. The GDP just grew 3.2%. We should be talking about that all week. And he'll get mad at somebody and tweet some response. It's kind of his, charm, if you will. But on the other hand, I'll just tell you, we should be talking about this economy growing, about record low unemployment among veterans and women and people of color, and not about, him being mad at somebody.